that really slow, isolating style, you kind of have to think 2 moves ahead a lot of the time, and it's not just about getting the next hole, but it's getting it like in the perfect way to do the move after, and then that keeps building. So you kind of have to almost work top down.
Tim, my dude, we've got David Fitzgerald on the podcast today. How's it going, Dave?
What's up, Dave?
Hey, how are you guys? Thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. It's a Monday. I don't know if I should disclose that in case we take a few weeks to post this, but it's Monday morning, and kind of psyched on that because we all get to talk about climbing on Monday morning. What a great lifestyle we lead. So Dave, I was trying to think about how to introduce you, and I think something that really stood out recently was Jimmy Webb. He's a climber. He's your friend. He posted on Instagram and called you one of the most underrated climbers out there. And yeah, I'm just going to let that little statement hang for a moment because Jimmy, I would say, is one of the best boulderers of all time. And when he says something like that, I just think we should all take notice. Yeah, I seriously, I just wanted to leave with that because I think it's really special. It just shows one of the reasons we were so excited to talk to you today. And then I thought back a little bit, and I remembered when you first moved to the Bay Area. I was still in the Bay Area at the time, and there were like these murmurs about this new guy who just moved here, and he had really strong fingers, and you do have really strong fingers, and we'll get into that later. But really, in the past couple of years, you've just been sending hard, making a name for yourself, establishing and repeating some of the hardest climbs here in the Sierras. And you keep showing up in the Mellow Tahoe videos with Jimmy and Carlo and Roman, which is really the strong California crew right now. And so, yeah, I thought that would be really fun to talk to you about what it's like being involved in this cutting edge crew, developing some of the hardest boulders around, and, what you've learned along the way doing that, what you've learned from those guys, and, how you've been able to really cement yourself as one of the top climbers in that crew too.
Yeah, interesting. It was actually quite hard, I feel, when I first moved over to kind of break into the circles over here. It's funny, it sounds like really quick that, I started to meet people and started to climb with people, but it took a while. And I mean, yeah, Jimmy is just one of the best like humans I've climbed with. He's just, there's no sense of competition. There's just a real openness to just sharing and just finding and climbing these amazing lines. He shares a very similar vision to me.
Well, I know Jimmy is really a seriously nice guy. And actually, he said that you were one of the nicest people he knew. But I have a hunch that you have really carved out your niche by really, showing up as one of the top climbers around. And rather than start there, I just thought it'd be interesting to go back to where and when you started climbing, because you're not from California, you're from Ireland. And how'd you even get into climbing, Dave?
Yeah, going way back. I started when I was like 18, almost 19, and I started in college. I grew up in Wicklow in Ireland, which is one of the kind of main hotspots for bouldering in Ireland, and then I moved to Dublin, which is the county above it, and then found climbing through university. And then I loved the fact that when I found climbing, it was a way to kind of bring myself back to the mountains in Wicklow, and then kind of have a new perspective coming back home, and that was
Wait, so you were born in the place where there's the best bouldering in Ireland, and then you left, and then you started bouldering.
Yeah, it's pretty unfortunate.
I guess they're not too far. Ireland's not that big, and yeah, I can't believe me and Tim were just amazed that you started at 18 or 19. You're Dude, 30. You're 30 now, but yeah, that's a late start. Yeah.
Somebody message me if you know anyone who's climbed 8C or harder and started past 18, other than Jimmy Webb. Somebody else messaged me that. I have no idea. You know, it's super rare. Do you know anyone else, Dave, who started like late and climbs as hard as you guys?
Um, ooh, um, bouldering wise, I'm not sure, but I'm sure they're out there.
Just a quick question: do you think that there's anything significant that you missed out on? Like anything that when you started climbing, you were like, oh, dude. Like, I mean, I'm sure a lot of us, even me, I started when I was 13. I was like, dude, I wish I started when I was 5. Because like I would have X, Y, and Z. Nowadays, I don't think about that as much. But was there something like when you were earlier on where you were like, oh, dude, for sure, like I wish I had this stuff?
Yeah, I think I wish I had the kind of base level that a lot of climbers just develop when they start from a young age, just this base endurance kind of thing. When I started, but when I started as well, I kind of had just so much motivation for climbing at that time, and I had the access to it. I was pretty independent when I was in university, and I was just able to climb whenever I wanted. And I feel if I had started earlier and I was kind of reliant on lifts to the gym or my parents, and it might have been it might have just been a bit of a different experience. Whereas when I actually started, I was just fully immersed and able to try and progress as quickly as possible. But I think that was also a motivator, the fact that I hadn't developed all these years of foundation, and then I was kind of thrown into it, and then it was just about trying to progress as quickly as possible. Like every year I wanted to hit a new grade or whatever.
That's actually good insight. Like if you did start earlier, you definitely wouldn't be as motivated to catch up because you'd already be doing it, but when you start later, you're like, kind of wish when I started climbing, my climbing partners had already been climbing for many, many years at that point. And the thing that I noticed immediately was how long they could last in the gym. And just like how long they could last doing hard movements over and over again. And for me, that was the thing I was the most jealous of. And I would get hurt. Like I got probably like 8 finger injuries in my first couple of years of climbing, just because I was trying to keep up, super motivated. But I also did get as good as them, very, very quickly. But yeah, that's good. That's good insight.
Yeah.
You're never too late.
Yeah, you're definitely never too late.
Yeah. It's also kind of interesting. It makes me think about, I started as a really young guy, and this idea of training, it sounds like you started climbing and you wanted to progress. And I'm wondering, like, does that mean that training instantly was part of your vocabulary when you started, or did that come later?
No, that definitely came later, I feel. I just kind of wanted to climb as much as possible. And I would always encourage that as well nowadays. If someone's looking to get into training from an early age, just to train on the wall, like train with movement, there's no point taking all these aspects of the sport and just like isolating them and then not having the kind of skills to put them together. I think that's like one of the biggest aspects of the sport. But as well, like I started, like, I think Irish climbers in general have pretty immaculate, kind of impeccable technique, like across the board. Same with UK climbers. There's something about maybe the nature of the kind of granite, the kind of bitey salt and pepper granite that you'd find in like Yosemite. That's kind of where I grew up. And I think also the nature of the climbing walls, the types of angles and the types of setting over there. And when I first started, I was always just inspired by the kind of refinement that a lot of these Irish climbers had in their movement, in their footwork, in their kind of like entire approach to the lifestyle. Like there were these there was this generation before I started who were kind of really pushing it, and I looked up to them a lot, like guys like just like Barry O'Dwyer and Chris Rooney and Kev Griffin and John Howard, my friend. I'm just kind of naming people now, but like those kind of guys who just their whole, like, they just had climbing refined to this art, and I kind of wanted to replicate that and kind of just mirror what they were doing. And then strength training came afterwards, much further down the line, because I realized how much I could do with a bit of extra. strength.
Yeah, guy, I love that. Just that love of the technique and the art of climbing. I'll say that I feel like, I don't know, maybe this is a American thing. When I started climbing, it was really Chris Sharma was on the scene, and I came out of gymnastics, and I actually was very, I don't want to say anti-technique, but I like the power. I wanted to yell like Chris, be a, grab the big holds, be a, I don't know, just a powerful climber. And luckily when you're a kid, you kind of ingrain this intuition technique. But I do think that, in some ways we are a product of that environment that we started in. And one of my buddies is a setter, and he is out of the UK. And when he sets, I swear he just has this feet first kind of style that is, it's not how I set. I'm like, okay, I got this sloper. Like, how far can I jump to the next hold? And then we'll see what happens. And I really think that's a product of the rock type he was brought up on, the era, his idols. And, you said something to me about, it made you fascinated about, climbing in Ireland and on that rock type made you fascinated about how to grab each hold, that maybe each hold had a specific best way to grab it. And I wanted to hear more about how that grabbed you, how that idea you found interesting, but also maybe even some nuts and bolts about what that means and how you put into practice. Cause I'm just going to raise my hand and say, I'm actually not so good on that. I know how important it is to find the right way to grab each hold, but sometimes I'm blown away that I pick a way that I think is good, and it's good for the position that I start in, but maybe not for the position that I end in. And just, that's an interesting topic to me. That's crucial for hard, thin climbing.
Yeah. On that kind of style, that really slow, isolating style, you kind of have to think 2 moves ahead a lot of the time. And it's not just about getting the next hold, but it's getting it like in the perfect way to do the move after. And then that keeps building. So you kind of have to almost work top down. Otherwise you can run into kind of roadblocks. But I think, there were 2 guys in Ireland who have pushed climbing kind of to a new level back there, who are like Michael Duffy and Ricky Bell. And those guys just have this kind of like, they've just achieved a level of mastery that I've always looked up to. And Michael specifically, he was kind of a mentor to me in my first few years. And he kind of introduced me to that whole school of thought that I still kind of carry with me today, that kind of refined, precise kind of approach to climbing. He has like full body strength, but his fingers he's probably got the strongest fingers I've ever seen, but like no one really knows about him. Like he doesn't have social media or anything. And yeah, he's another one that would extremely underrated. But he kind of introduced me to that whole idea of subtlety and breaking things apart, and then working on the individual aspects and then kind of stitching them back together in a really kind of precise way.
I've definitely, I know Ricky Bell. He's a character, and once you meet him, it's hard to forget him.
Yeah.
Michael Duffy, I do know of him. I've been lucky enough to spend a little bit of time in Ireland, and it's a beautiful place. I really recommend people go. Whenever you see pictures of it, it's like, it's very green, but then when you go there, you realize what that deep greenness actually looks like. This idea of small holds and finding the right way to grab them. I kind of led with talking about how you really have amazing finger strength, and you corroborated that with your video of you hanging on a hangboard on the edges, the outside edges of the Beastmaker for like 30 seconds each on one arm casually. I don't know, we can pick on that later. But what also stood out to me is that you said that hanging on small holds or using small holds, even though it seems like a strong point for you, there's a big skill component. And I guess, it's what do you mean by that? Because I guess I see these videos of you doing incredible strength achievements, but then when I watch you climb on some of these really thin test pieces in Tahoe, you know, the technique is more than evident. And so I guess, how do you think, how do you think about moving over small holds on rock, or how does that relate to your strength training around fingers as well?
I think starting, first of all, having a foundation on the wall, I think is pretty key before going into all the kind of like isolated strength training. Learning, you know, climbing on small holds is a lot to do with other parts of your body. It's often not as isolated as you might think. I think like learning how to use your hips and pulling and pushing with your legs, and you know, I think like learning directional pull as well is quite important. It's not so it's not always so linear as it is on, say, a hangboard or other like tools. Oftentimes you'll have to pull away from the wall, and learning how to engage your core at the right time, just coordinating all your limbs at once, I think that should be the foundation. And then when you want to kind of push it a bit more, then you can take those things, remove all the variables like footwork and body fatigue, and then you can isolate it outside of that kind of realm, and then work on just that pure kind of strength. And then you can just like fit into positions and move around small holds in a slightly different way. But you have to move on small holds in a different kind of way, in a very precise and methodical way.
I like how the first thing you say when Josh asked, like, you have super strong fingers, and clearly that's, you know, significant in your strong climbing, and you're saying basically, you know, strong fingers, are important, but it's far more important to have all the factors that are not your strong fingers to support having, you know, grabbing small holds. Where I have a very, very similar philosophy, except I don't have strong fingers. I definitely can't hang on a Beastmaker edge or anything, but I very much try to have the compounding things. I actually am leaning much, much more towards finger strength building, though, more in the last just couple years of my climbing, just because it's, for me, finally a limiting factor. You know, I'm finally running into things where I'm like, okay, I think I'm doing everything else that, you know, has everything else that's, you know, related to the movement or like executing a climbing movement, but my fingers are now the limiting factor. Whereas for you, you're saying if you do want to accomplish climbing movements, you kind of have to have a little bit of everything. And the skill component of how you use your finger strength is far more important than having the finger strength. And going back to, you know, talking about like the training philosophies in general, I actually, you know, back to when Josh was asking about how you know, when you started climbing and did you get straight into training, and you were kind of immediately like, hell no, like, you know, I just want to climb as much as possible. And I started training right away. I was just grew up like a super lanky kid. You know, when I was 13, I was like, dude, if I want to be, and maybe it's because you start when you're in college and maybe already had some like fitness or like strength, but I definitely didn't. I was super, super weak. So I climbed a ton. I climbed as much as possible. And then afterward, I would do as many pull-ups and push-ups as possible. But that's all I would do for training. I would just like get my body stronger. But that, and then I started doing like some finger things, but that's when I started getting injured. But yeah, I can't echo that enough. Like, from someone who did do all that strength building, like, dude, technique was first for sure. If I could go back and redo my climbing, I would probably just climb as much as possible and then climb more in like different ways and like focus on it. But I do have a small question. And oh, man, I want to bring up something else. But you said that UK climbers and Irish climbers are like impeccable technique and, you know, try to display perfect technique. I think that's super interesting, because growing up, I always heard that like the French had perfect technique and like the French had the perfect finesse, and they are very, very technical climbers. But now that I've grown up, I see the French style as like extremely efficient. You know, I see that style more as like extremely efficient. But when I see, and American climbers are kind of the opposite of that, where like we're trying to be as aggressive as possible, and that's not inefficient, you know, necessarily. Sometimes it is, and efficiency sometimes can lack aggression, but, you know, sometimes it doesn't. But the point is that that's where I see it mostly shown in like the mastery thing, things that we have. But, growing up also, like, I did hear a lot of these names, Irish names and like UK names. And by the way, I think Josh said that our number one downloads come from the UK. So obviously, because they listen to Testpiece podcast, they're the best technical climbers. But
thank you.
It's interesting. I think you have a unique approach in your climbing where I don't hear a lot of really strong pro climbers bring such an homage to their history and, the people from the area. And you have such a significant it sounds like your style came from other people and, came from, or your approach in general, your philosophy came from other people who've like truly shown you mastery. I think that's just really, really interesting. And how you, you don't have to respond to that, but I just thought that was super interesting that you find so much significance from the people that you saw. And, I always kind of say this, like Josh is the one person that I saw, like kind of growing up with. For me growing up, I saw this kind of impeccable output of power.
Tell Dave about my impeccable technique and what you saw me doing. I was campusing on jugs is what I was doing.
Yeah. But it was actually really interesting. It was like, and you probably would have found this fascinating at the time. Like Josh was doing this basically like V3 or whatever on the PG overhang. And we had the Sunnyvale overhang, like the back wall where it's quite steep. And he was just like doing this thing where he would just grab a hold and just lock it off clean, grab it and like position his body, like perfectly rotate, grab the next one. Like, and for strong climbers, it's fairly easy to do that. But I got to tell you, like, I could watch probably 50 different people do, 10 pull-ups and, a couple guys are going to look really, really, really strong doing 10 pull-ups. And for me, I was like, wow, like not only can Josh campus a V3, but he can make it look the easiest and the best possible. Like that for me was really cool. And going,
not only could Josh campus a V3, basically I was trying to impress girls, but all I got was a 12-year-old Tim. Well, actually, but there is something interesting there where I have something. I really like this body where you hold something and you isolate your whole body. The whole idea was that rather than campusing where you thrutch from one place to another, you never let the angle of your arm open, so you can only basically pull up like a one arm. And it's just interesting when you find that spot and you completely tighten your whole body and then you reach with just one limb, right? And to me, there's something about that in climbing, and when you're talking about that granite or that more vertical terrain, maybe there's some consequences with that grit up in the UK. That you said the word isolate, and we're talking about holding things perfectly. And there's something about that style of being in control, finding the position and holding it and being smooth with that. Honestly, often it's that one limb. Now, sometimes there's a dynamic component, but it rings true. How you climb and where you were brought up, and that did influence you. Although, of course, where you're at now, you've grown into your own climber and been, maybe now you're influenced by some of your crew, as we always are. But it's just kind of cool to hear that background.
Yeah. I kind of still think about, Michael and Ricky's kind of level of their level of like polished practice. Whenever I go to a project nowadays, it's kind of almost become this like habit where I actively think about that level of craftsmanship, and kind of going back to like the campsing and that kind of raw display of power. When I first started climbing, I as well kind of, as like anyone who starts in the gym, you see people campsing stuff and it's just like pretty amazing and you want to replicate it. And I think I got pretty good at that skill quite early on. And then when Michael kind of took me onto a board and kind of wanted to break down what I was doing and see how I could progress, he basically just took apart my style on the board. And I was like, on boards, I'm pretty good. I can climb well on boards, and I would have classed that as a strength of mine, like overhanging walls. But then he was able to really break that apart and figure out weaknesses that were almost cloaked within that field of strength, and where my if my foot was in a certain position, how I could generate from it, kind of hip mobility stuff, and how to grab holds in different ways to really milk them and get the most out of them. And that just opened my eyes up to a more specific form of an approach, where it wasn't just so general anymore, and it was more about pinpointing those things that actually make a difference in climbing. Because the hardest climbs in the world, like, you cut feet and you're off. You can't. Obviously, the kind of raw strength that you build through those kind of more isolated exercises like campsing and hangboarding help a lot in some cases, but they're not everything. And I think I learned that pretty early.
Tristan came on and said something, very similar, where like he climbed with Danny Fong, and Danny was basically like, your footwork is shit, basically. And like Tristan was saying the thing where, like, you watch most V9 climbers and it's like they're putting their feet on the wall, but they're not using their feet. Mm-hmm. And I think he said something similar where, like, on the hardest climbs, the holds are just so bad and the positions are so difficult that you probably aren't on if you are cutting feet. So, are you saying that his footwork is super key? But
so I don't know if you remember, but do you remember what some of your weaknesses were back then, and what you did to address them? And I'm also curious to fast forward now. It's hard for me to pick out weaknesses when I'm watching you climb. But what do you struggle with now today, even though you're climbing 8Cs?
I struggle a lot with. I think mainly because I've trained on boards with a very specific mindset for so many years, without, like, no toe hooks, no heel hooks, that kind of style. I've developed, or I just haven't really, I don't really understand the mechanics behind toe hooks very well. And I think, Jimmy and Keenan have opened my eyes up to that, what you can achieve in that style. That's, like, definitely a weakness of mine. I think more basic though, even in my style, what I would class as my style is in kind of smaller holds. If the foothold is, if the handhold is just beyond lock point, and the foothold is such that you can't claw into it, and you have to if it's like a dot or a flat sloping edge where you have to push into it and go beyond your lock point and have the coordination to stick. I struggle a lot with that. Whereas
sounds
if there's a claw.
You just talked about the Burden of Dreams first move.
Yes.
I think that first move is also, like, the exact style you just said. For some reason, the Burden of Dreams first move just came into mind, and I was like, that is the exact type of move that I would suck at too. Like, I hate it. It's the timing. The timing is so strange. I think, like, when you rely on, it's interesting that that's a style that you instantly were like, yep, I hate that style, because I think it goes to show, like, what your strengths are, and, like, using your mechanics and, like, really well, and, like, in control and knowing what they're doing. But that style is a little bit more like do it all at once. It's the exact opposite of, like, what Josh was talking about with the campus block offs.
So that's my style. Is I like when things are a little too far, because I'm not as good at controlling that thing. I'm not as good on small holds. And so when, people can just really lock it off and creep to it, I struggle. But if the hold's good enough to generate on, even when the foot's bad, I can get to it, and then I can latch things and really connect. And it's interesting. I don't know. I just was patting myself on the back for being good at something. But I think what's interesting is that you talked about boards and finger strength, and one of the reasons why it seemed like you head in that direction also is that I had asked you, like, what kind of climbs do you like? Like, what gets you up in the morning, or what projects do you choose and why? And you said you were always struck by these overhanging blank faces. And I was like, oh yeah, you do, Dave. Like, you like those too. But the two things you said that was interesting to me, especially, is that you've leaned into that, and you have made some of your training around that. And then the other thing you said is that you felt like when you saw a line that was beautiful and clean, you felt obliged to climb it in a beautiful and clean way. And I just thought that was like an interesting mix of aesthetics in the sense of this is pretty. And then there's an aesthetics of, and I want to make my climbing match that, that beauty that you see. And I guess the question there is, how do you select projects? How do you prepare for them? And yeah, actually, there's the question. That's it.
How do I pick projects and how do I prepare? Yeah, I think, I mean, aesthetics are subjective to everyone. But for me, yeah, it is these blank faces that have just the right amount of holds. There's nothing in excess. Kind of, the texture of the wall, how interesting the individual holds are. I think coming from Ireland, I was kind of like when you climb on these smaller boulders, which are Ireland has amazing quality rock, but some of the climbs are quite small, and so you end up just like staring at the same holds and like really, even if you've done the problem a million times, you just keep repeating it and finding new ways to hold them, and you just like really analyze things on a smaller, more granular level. And I think now I'm really interested in finding these taller, blanker faces with just the same amount of kind of interesting minutia to the holes. And then, I've structured my train. During COVID, I kind of had a period where I didn't have access to climbing at all for like 11 months. And I was kind of forced to just hangboard in a shed. And I just spent a lot of time at that point thinking about what I kind of wanted to do in climbing and the types of things that I wanted to climb. And the things that were just popping out to me were these just huge overhung blank faces, like Boogalizing,
Dream rig for me, dude.
Yeah.
So cool. I watched your video. Yeah, that video was awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I want to hear more. Keep saying the names of different climbs and make my hand sweat. I want to hear.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of years ago, I did this thing that Jimmy put up called Fallen Angel, something like that. There's like, even last year I tried Book of the Dead, which was this route that Jimmy put up. It's this kind of 14B or something.
Is that cool? Oh, that's on my list.
That is like one of the sickest walls I've ever seen in my life, and I hate tying in. I hate it.
I was gonna say, I'm surprised you're not a route climber. Why?
Yeah.
Do you sport climb much? Do you plan on it? Like
No.
Your philosophy and like your analytical, I don't know, not your. A lot of climbers have strong analytical ability, but you clearly lean into that as being like the derivative of your technique, and like that's what sport climbing is. I think, man, I'm gonna take you out and sport climb. We're gonna go sport climb together. I'm trying to get into it more, so we're gonna do it. You're gonna love it.
Yeah, honestly, I do like the idea a lot. I've just never, I've never engaged with it enough to get over the fear factor. I've never. I feel like for me to like enjoy it, I have to do it consistently, and I've just never had the right kind of access.
Dude, don't you like hearing from amazing boulder that he actually can be afraid of sport climb? I'm just giving you credit. I'm literally giving you credit, Dave, because I feel like I know so many boulders who tell me they don't sport climb, and it's because they don't like it or because they get too pumped. And I swear to God, something they may not even recognize is often that there's a fear associated with it, and that fear also really inhibits their ability to just move.
Yes.
And so my friend's always saying, I need to do some laps in the gym on some sport climb so I can gain endurance. I'm like, dude, you just did like a 15 move V12. Like, you have endurance, you just aren't able to exhibit it in that domain. So I don't know, we don't have to go into sport climbing, and I just think that's cool that you actually like, just off the cuff, we're like, yeah, by the way, it kind of scares me because I mean, you shouldn't be scared, and you are right on the idea of exposure would really resolve it. But that Book of the Dead, when I saw that video, it's kind of like I know it's not a boulder, but it literally looks like a giant boulder, and it is beautiful. And I heard from Roman that it's thin. He said it's thin.
Yeah, the holes are small. It's just this. It's the thing that would get me to tie in. Basically, if I have to tie in to climb
That's
that,
awesome.
I have to tie in.
Yeah. I mean, I think sport climbing is so interesting because you brought up something earlier called climbing math. And it was something that I brought up in conversation yesterday, sessioning with Michaela, my girlfriend, who's like a 2-year climber. So like, you know, a lot of things, she climbs strong, but like a lot of things are like fairly new and like so many things come at her. And the biggest thing is she likes to like suggest when I fall on something, like she likes to like talk about what could have happened or like why I picked something. You know, strong climbers on the wall, like on-sighting gym boulders, like tend to just pick beta that maybe isn't so conventional or like not immediately readable. And she's like, it's so interesting. Like I would have done this next section on this boulder, like with this foot setup. And I was like, well, if you put that foot setup, you leave your feet behind. Right. And she's like, oh, interesting. But it makes it way easier to do this movement than to do that movement. I was like, but that movement's way harder. Right. So it's way more important to set up for the hard move. And I just thought it was fascinating. Something that's not talked about so much is climbing math. You know, like the battle of a climb is a 100% effort game. It should be, right. And how you spend your effort should be calculated accordingly on what you have, and your ability to analyze and your ability to react in the moment is kind of dependent on how that 100% output goes, right? So if it takes you only 40% to do this one movement, but it costs you 80 now because you're set up to do the next movement, it's probably better to go 50 and 50 and, you know, take a little bit more effort to do this movement, but it's for sure going to be less effort on the next thing. I think that's something super interesting that you talked about, that sport climbing, because that's the point of like getting into French positions. And that's exactly that, like that style. But I'm curious if, you know, over the years that, you know, we talked about, I think that would be super interesting to break down climbing in that way.
Let's, because we hadn't clicked record when we were talking about climbing math, and it was a climb that, Tim, you forgot, man. So we were talking about Big Z. Big Z is, I believe it's a V16 in Tahoe. I've never seen it. It looks pretty. It is one of those overhanging blank walls, not a lot of holds, which Sean Rabitou put up actually quite a while ago now. And yeah, the climbing math you were talking about was that it's really hard. But maybe we could go into your experience on Big Z. And I think one of the things that really got me about it is, you haven't quite sent it yet, although damn, those videos you sent me are heart-breakingly close. But you also mentioned that you were working on it with Jimmy, and I want to say, was it Matt Foltz? Or there's been other people who you've sessioned on. They all have like a different ways. And, how do you think about choosing your way, or just maybe your experience on Big Z thus far, other than the sad fall at the very end?
No, definitely not sad. I'm psyched to try that one every day. I've never had a bad session on it. It's just a really complex sequence of moves. And, I mean, the climbing math is what we were saying earlier, where the climbing math comes into it, and the fact that the climbing math doesn't always work. You know, when you're breaking down climbs into the difficulty of a climb can be substantially, different based on whether the low percentage move is at the start or at the end. And with Big Z, there's this one move that so it breaks down into this bottom section and then a stand start. And the stand start is kind of goes up the arete. You pull on with these two opposing side pulls, and you chuck a toe hook around the corner, and you basically do two moves. You do one move to like this miserable little bitey. It's really it's objectively not a very nice hold. It's there's no real ergonomic way to hold it. It's just it's just horrible. But then you kind of ride up your toe hooks on the arete, and then you're so spanned in this position that you have to drop into this little slot, which is good when you get it, but it's really hard to time it. And for me, I have to have the have the energy to be in the right position for the move from the start. And so, yeah, with the climbing math thing that we were talking about, is that the bottom section is a lot harder than the stand start. It's maybe this 8C, but it's a very controllable 8C. And then the stand start is this really low percentage 8A plus. And if you flip the two, if you were to flip the two and have the low percentage 8A plus at the start, you could do it and then climb into that very controllable 8C, and it wouldn't be nearly as the same challenge as what it is right now. It's just a very it's an interesting and complex challenge that I kind of love, honestly.
Those are mentally difficult too. Yes. Just those things where you're like, okay, I can crush the hard part, but then those low percentage moves, I was saying how it's so strange how when you have those coordination moves that aren't even necessarily unbelievably physically hard, but just making it happen when you're tired, and there's a mental component. And then if you try to overpower it, like maybe you feel good right there, and you try to overpower it, and that ruins it too. And just putting that all together, it's again why climbing is such a skill sport and a mental sport, and having that impressive hangboard resume that you do doesn't guarantee success on the move that theoretically is easier than the ones into it. And I will say, watching your videos, that 8C, you really excel on it. And actually, one thing I wanted to say, because you were talking about being on the board and not doing as much toe hooking or heel hooking, or that's maybe something that you need to get better at. Yes. What is interesting is that you seem to do bicycles very well. I wonder if that's like a board thing, because it's in that same plane. It's not, okay, like I need to put my hip here and then drop my foot so that I get weight on the heel. It's very like tension, flat. I don't know. Do you find that you do well on bicycles because of board climbing, or is that related?
Yeah. Bicycles are something that I've always loved. I like those tight little boxes, especially. And this season in particular, I started to train these kind of toe hooks. I would tie a band against kind of a pole in the gym and kind of sit away from it and tense the band, and then do these holds. I would pull the band towards me I'd wrap it around my toe, the top of my foot, and I'd pull it towards me and do these 5-second holds. And towards the end of this season, I would go out there and I felt like I wasn't just placing the toe, I was actively able to pull against, this is the lower crux. I'd be able to I felt like I could pull as hard as I could, whereas before I felt like I was kind of limited and I couldn't really feel what muscles were working.
Wait, can we just dig into that a little bit more? When you say that you're putting on the band around your toe and training toe hooks, and you said when you bring the band towards you, are you saying that you were just using dorsiflexion? Like, were you only moving your ankle towards you, or were you like pulling up with your knee and abs, or like, how'd that actually look?
So pulling with the whole leg. So I was basically if my leg was fully extended, I'd pull my knee towards my face basically, and and then my leg would be kind of at 90 degrees.
So you're more resisting the toe tension versus like engaging the toe tension.
Exactly. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Dude, the one thing that I do have to make a caveat for I think any listener who listens to a pro climber like provide a training thing that they've done will be like, oh my God, I'm gonna go fucking do that. And I think like that,
I'm gonna go do that, Tim.
While everyone probably should do that, I think the caveat I want to make is, the biggest thing that Dave said right there, by the way, which is so amazing, is like the reason why you did that training in the first place was because you found a weakness, right? You went there and you were like, I wish this was stronger. And then you went straight there and you were like, this is stronger. And that goes way back to what you were saying about like, why would I train in the beginning? Like, I don't have fundamentals to like tie these skills together, like I don't have the skills to like tie these strengths together. And the point there is like you gained the strength because you knew what you were missing, and then you knew how to apply it. And you also knew the difference between once it was applied, like because you see the classic people who like go into the gym and are like way too strong for their own good, have no idea what the difference is between like turning your hip versus reaching to the next hold with X, Y, and Z muscle. And I just wanted to say that it was really interesting to like, if you are going to train something, you do want to see, like, you really want to see like what it was without it, and you want to see what it is with it. So you actually understand the significance of that training, and that training actually kind of like I think that sounds to me like a lot of your climbing growth and like training habits and your training decisions have been because of stuff like that, where, you know, you are a very obsessive climber is something that I noticed, like, you know, from watching what I've watched already. It's like, and in the Voyager film and like in Bugle Ison, like, you know, you're so obsessive in the movements and like just trying, and that goes into the type of training that you do. It's obvious that you don't just beat your head against the wall, although you're really good at that. You beat your head against the wall as much as you can on that session, and then you go back to the gym and you go back to whatever. And, you know, you more than, you know, some people tell me, like or have told us, like the kind of weird wonky training things that you do, but they sprout from an experience and then they go straight to the same experience. And I think that's just super fascinating and an important caveat.
Yes. Yeah. Being able to apply it, I think is crucial. Just having those strengths by themselves and not knowing how to actually utilize them, are just, they don't really, that's kind of a waste of time in climbing, I feel.
Yeah.
So is that part of, I wanted to hear about the projects that you have selected or the ones in front of you, because we talked a little bit about how you prep for things. And I know that lucid dreaming was on your list of to-dos last year, but then due to weather, it just wasn't even accessible really, which is a wild year. So lucid dreaming is a specific boulder. And had you tried it before? How did you decide to prepare for something so specific as that climb?
Yeah, I had tried it before. It was it was the first boulder I tried in Bishop, and it was the first year.
That's awesome. That's freaking awesome. Go on. Just like, okay, that dude, you know who that reminds me of is Jamie Emerson said that, where he's like, I moved to Colorado. Come show me the hardest boulder here. Okay, that's like basically what you did. That's cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm a little, yeah, not. It was more out of the fact that I just didn't. I was like by myself, and there aren't too many things you can try, and also that one has been on my mind for years. But it was the first year I moved over to the States, and a family friend lent me a car, and I just kind of had Lucid on my mind and made a couple weekend trips up to try it, and got super obsessed, and then had about maybe 4 sessions on it, 3 or 4, and then COVID hit. And then I wasn't able to touch it then for that whole year. And then I was building back the next season to try and get my strength back. And then the year after, I kind of just thought that, you know, I had all these other distractions in Bishop as well, and everywhere else, you know, Tahoe, Yosemite. And I felt like just doing my apprenticeship a bit more, and kind of like climbing my distractions, so that when I go back to try lucid dreaming, it'll be this kind of very focused effort. And this season I had goals to go, but I think I planned 3 trips, and every single one of them I bailed when I was in Tahoe.
Because you were trying something else.
Yeah, the first trip, so because of all the snow and rain, I kind of I thought a lot of the stuff in Tahoe was kind of out of commission for the season. And then so I would drive up to Tahoe, because Tahoe's like perfectly splits up the trip to Bishop, and then I'd stay at Jimmy and Hannah's, and then which is amazing, by the way. I'm super grateful that they put me up every time. But every time I would go, I'd start talking about Tahoe stuff, and then they'd get me psyched on that. And then I'd wake up the next morning fully intending to drive to Bishop, but then kind of slowly just, maybe I'll try something here. And then I just got roped into awesome. Big Z, and I cleaned that off and stuff. But Lucid, yeah, I was training all season for it and never really got a chance to actually try it. But I think a lot of the kind of strengths that I built on the boards and the kind of weird little replicas that I was making helped a lot for other things. And I think the training wasn't wasted, but I'm still super excited to go try it next season.
I'll be excited to see how it goes. I feel like either you're going to absolutely crush it, and you'll just find that your replicas were good, or you might have that experience where you go, wait, this is so hard. Like I don't know. Do you ever have that where you think something's going to be really easy and that's not, or vice versa? I love when I think something's just not my style and it's going to be really difficult, and I show up and it goes well. But I'm dealing with easier climbs, not the famous lucid dreaming, which has got to be one of the hardest 8Cs out there. Is my hunch. Not many people. Yeah. I'm trying to think. Has anyone done lucid dreaming that isn't a V16 climber? Like
I don't think so, actually.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
So. Yeah.
I've never thought about that.
So you might have to do Big Z first.
Yeah.
V16 before
it's just overpowered.
Yeah. Dude, I thought when in our meet and greet conversation when we talked before the pod, you talked about I think Josh asked like how are you trying to prepare for lucid dreaming, and I kind of mentioned that I've had quite a few people ask me for like dimensions and like to set replicas and whatnot, and you kind of mentioned something that I found similar, where like replica training isn't the best way to train, but understanding like the kind of derivative mechanics behind like certain movements and the positions and why those positions are difficult, and like training that was something that you said was significant. Like lucid's obviously very specific, where it's got this really brutal undercling and a really high foot position, so you're kind of locked in, or you like load into the position and snatch this pinch. But the pinch is like a terrible, greasy, thin pinch that's completely vertical essentially. And then you have to jump off of it. And, the thing that you said was like, no one ever grabs a pinch above their head like that. That's really small, and then pulls onto it. And so loading that type of, force is like more of what you're going to train, sounds like what you're saying. So, I mean, two things out of that, like, that's awesome. That's super interesting. I would love to hear you dive in deeper on that. And two, why not replica training for you? Like, why is that? What does that take away, I guess, for you?
Yeah. Well, first with the replica training, I've always had the something Michael Duffy as well said to me when I first started, that be careful with replica training, in that it can sometimes get into your head if you can't do it in training, in practice, and that will inhibit you from wanting to go try it.
Interesting.
And I think going out there and getting on the real thing is always going to be better learning. But in terms of training specifically for lucid with the pinch, like you said, I mean, you never come across that in commercial gyms, like where you're grabbing a vertical pinch above your head. It's just so specific, and it kind of like you don't have the same access to your larger muscles when you're climbing in that position. And specifically when you're reaching above your head and you have your thumb extended as much as you can, and then you're pushing even further above your head, it's just this really disadvantageous position for your wrist to be in. And grip strength is obviously linked heavily with wrist position. For me, I just set I helped set the spray board at Benchmark climbing in Berkeley. And I just threw on a bunch of vertical pinches. And I mean, they can be used as side pulls. It wasn't completely selfish.
Like, what are you doing, Dave?
I've laughed about this to Max as well, who owns the gym.
It's so funny.
And it was just more about getting used to it was more like neuromuscular training in a way. I was just getting used to feeling comfortable in the position of grabbing thinner and thinner pinches above my head and trying to load them in an isolated way, so that I could take as much weight as possible. And then that was kind of my main.
That's awesome.
That totally makes sense. I have a note that says strength versus position, and like training positions versus strength. What an interesting climb. I hope to get to see you out there. And Tim, you've expressed some interest.
Oh, I will be trying it. I'll be trying it with you for sure.
Definitely.
I'll be grabbing pinches above my head all summer long.
Yes.
So we talked a little bit about how you got stuck in Tahoe because of Jimmy. What a guy. you've gotten to climb all over the world, often because you maybe lived a different part of the world as well. But I know you've spent some time on, like Bugaleisen and Big Paw and stuff like that. And you made a comment to me that you didn't really feel like you had any need to travel right now because there was so much around for you to climb. And I mean, we've already just named a ton of really cool climbs. And I guess I wanted to hear from you about what's been like being in this Tahoe scene and what you guys are out there doing. It seems like every time a new, I don't know, Mellow drop, or I don't know, there's so much media around you all doing really cool new FAs in the hard range. And just, well, how's it been going? Like, what's it like being one of those guys? It looks awesome.
I mean, yeah, I have to pinch myself every time I'm out with them. I'm just so grateful to be in that mix of, just really, just highly skilled climbers, and who have the motivation to find, and like they hike on their rest days, looking for new climbs, and then they just hike and climb and they're searching, and it's just a really wholesome pursuit that I really admire, of like contributing something to an area. And I mean, Tahoe has some of the best climbs that I've ever been on, and there just seems to be more areas like being found, really. There's this kind of not a new zone, but it's this zone with a bunch of things that Roman and Jimmy cleaned off last year that we're all super excited to go and develop a little. The acorn boulders.
Yeah. Where are we? Don't have to edit this. No. I gotta ask you, just while we're on this topic of Tahoe, do you have a recommendation on what's your kind of top, I'll just say like easy, medium, and hard boulder is? Just like really good memory of each of those climbs.
Dave's like, I don't do easy boulders. I don't know what you're talking about.
You mean like V11? Is that? You can take that wherever you want. Just like if there's a couple of climbs that just because sometimes it's not even. It's like what has stood out in your head is like, wow, that was a special time. I had a good moment there. I'm just trying to write my tick list right now.
Yeah.
I just want to know.
Yeah. The best easier thing that I've done in Tahoe is I don't even know if it has a name. And it's in this zone that I don't even know the name of the zone. But
can you get us a picture of it?
I could get you a video.
Drop a pin.
It's this kind of high thing, and it sits in the middle of this talus, and it's just like this knife edge, and you climb up this kind of arête. You climb around this arête, and it just has it's high, but it was just the perfect difficulty for me.
Roughly, do you have a grade on it?
I think it's like V8 or
nice.
Something like that. V7, V8. And
perfect
it just
eyeball grade in my opinion.
Yeah,
perfect eyeball grade. Yeah,
rope down it, sussed the moves, got them to a place where they were very controllable, and then I just could enjoy the climbing. Most times on high balls, I get a bit wigged out, and if there's anything past my lock point, I get really wigged out. And this one was just perfect. Really good climbing. And and then medium. Ooh.
That's not the medium. Go on. Yeah.
What is me?
It doesn't. It's just whatever. I'm joking. It's because the point is not to make people know if they're climbing an easy, medium, or hard. It's more just like, what are some cool climbs that aren't? If you're like, okay, Big Z, Fallen Angel, and Bachala, I feel like, well, okay, like that's easy, medium, and hard at 13, 15, and 16. But I don't know. We can come back to it, man.
Do you have a best V10 that's not Crown Jewel?
Oh, I haven't even climbed Crown Jewel yet.
Shit!
I'm excited to go try. Best V10. Oh, on the spot here.
damn, do I have a best V10? Mine would be Crown Jewel. That's got to be one of the best climbs in just out there. I want to do that stream. Okay, I don't want to hold you to the spot too hard. A couple of things that I was texting with Jimmy before, and he actually did really share that appreciation that you have that same love of development, and he thought that you would make a huge impact on this area in the development of amazing and hard lines, that you guys did share that vision. And so first of all, I just want to say, thank you to Jimmy as well, and everyone putting in that work. I know that a lot of it is done out of love of developing, but I think it's, as someone who doesn't have a ton of time personally, I don't, my rest days are not spent hiking. They're spent changing diapers. So I do appreciate people getting out there and doing it, which I think is really cool. And something else that Jimmy said that I think is interesting is he did also happen to mention that you have very strong fingers, which you seem very humble about, not wanting to dive into too much. But he also said that you were technically extremely proficient. And I hit back with that, where Jamie Emerson, when we had him on, he's climbed a lot with Jimmy. And he said, hey, people see Jimmy's shoulders and go like, wow, Jimmy is so strong. Look at Jimmy, he's strong. And I'm not going to say Jimmy's not strong, but Jamie argued that he was perhaps one of the most technically proficient climbers in the world. And what made me think about is how we often all have these natural strengths and maybe natural weaknesses, as a corollary. But it's underlying that always has to be this insanely good technical ability. And it's just funny because it just is this theme throughout this whole pod, this pod in particular, but all of them, where it's just a reminder that no matter what your extra ability is, it kind of has to be layered on top. It's you can then shine in that particular ability, but that underpins a technical proficiency. And where I wanted to go with that was just maybe asking what you have seen climbing with this crew, who is, full of extremely good climbers, and you can pick and choose. There's lots of great names in that California scene, but has climbing with Jimmy taught you anything particular, or climbing with Carl, or climbing with Roman? What have you learned from those great climbers?
Yeah, I think, going back to technique, I feel technique often gets just mislabeled as just meaning good footwork, and it's so much more than that. It's the entire approach to climbing, and a kind of a refinement of movement where there's no wasted energy. And I think all of those guys really embody that. They know how to use their strength, and I think that's.
I clicked mark on my little thing. I'm like, that one's getting clicked. Sorry, but dude, let's not interrupt him. Let's leave him alone. We agree. We hear you.
What else? I think their whole approach to projecting is really. Every session I take a lot out of how they approach climbs, and always refining beta. You refine the beta, you refine it some more. You're always looking for new, different ways to do moves, something to make it just a little bit easier. Could be anything, and then patience with it as well. I think learning to be patient in the process is really important. Resting, all of that stuff. And then overall, just those guys just have an incredible eye for the line and what can be possible. And then having climbed with them for a while now, I'm starting to develop kind of a sense of that myself in terms of what might be doable, what, how to approach certain things.
So the perspective must just be immense, how much you've gained from that. You can add on to that, but I have a question for you. I kind of have two parts to this, and this second part was something I was very interested in hearing you talk about. But the first part of that is, obviously, like even for me growing up, and even now, if I climb with anyone who's older than me, I definitely like instantly observe their tactics, you know, and their philosophies. Even if it's something that I don't necessarily value as much in my own climbing, I'm like, that's probably just better in some way, you know, like the tactics come from a very specific experience, and that's just, you know, has to be respected, and you know, it's obviously valuable in some cases, but you know, clearly it works really, really well for them, and that shows in like how much it applies to your climbing for sure. But to flip that, do you think there's anything that you've added in, like, you know, in your approach and your philosophy and your mindset that they've taken from you? I'm just curious, like, you know, it might be gloaty, but you know, like, I'm just curious, in your not humble opinion, do you think there's anything that you've added to that kind of wave, that vibe?
Oof, I don't know about that. I think one thing that Jimmy said, we were climbing on this amazing snowball project that he did last month. And one thing he said, he seemed pretty excited at the idea of, seemed excited by the community that we have at the moment, in that we all have our individual strengths. And he was kind of, he just expressed how exciting that was for the scene as a whole, because it just means everyone will approach a boulder from a different perspective, and then that just kind of grows grows possibilities. I'll try something that he might not have thought about, and definitely vice versa. Although when it's vice versa, I usually can't do the same things that he does, whereas he can kind of always do the things that I can.
That's awesome.
I just want to, sorry, I shouldn't interrupt you, but I freaking love that, because what I would say is not yet, because what I heard from you and what you've learned from those guys is kind of these two ends of the spectrum. There's going extremely granular, right? Like, you know, really, you know, continuing to do that deep dive into the nitty gritty of how to do moves, refine things, be efficient. But then there's also this different perspective, like what's possible. And you said something about that. I assume you mean looking at new lines and going like, does this even go? And it you know, they open up your perspective. But that also includes when you're climbing with them and you see him do a move and you're like, oh, I didn't even see that hold because it's past my lock off. So it wasn't really in my, you know, field of vision. But then when you see Jimmy do it, well, now you're going to try it. And, yes. You know, maybe you won't do it as quickly as Jimmy, or maybe you can't do it now. But I just think that it's so valuable to have that kind of shift in perspective. And I have a hunch that, you do the same thing to Jimmy, which is just, I do love that. Multiple styles together. It is special. That's so cool, man. I'm happy for you guys.
Just seeing different and seeing what's possible, I think, because like, yes, that's your point there. That's so significant. But you didn't have necessarily a strong stance on like how much you're adding to the scene, but maybe this will help, because in watching, I think I've watched pretty much everything public that has you climbing in it now. But the thing that I kind of immediately saw was that two things. One, you look like you're having more fun than most pro climbers have, especially on hard climbs. I think that's extremely, something I want to dive into, which goes into this next thing, which is you don't give up. Like, no matter how like close or far you are from any of those climbs that you're trying, Voyager or Bugleisen, or like just watching you try those things, like, there are a lot of tries that I would see and most people would walk away or call the session. A lot of tries that I would see that most people would make, clear adjustments, but you just beat your head against. I think it was in Bugleisen where you said this quote that, I have heard a lot in the earliest part of my climbing, and I haven't heard it in many, many, many years. But 99.9% of bouldering is falling. And how could you, and I think you said you gotta fix this for me, but I'm paraphrasing here, but you're basically saying that if you're trying to get, if 0.1% of the experience, which is the send, is the experience that you want, then like, what are you doing? Right. And you're trying to say that, you do have to enjoy the process and of falling. Like you have to enjoy that process of falling, which is extremely underrated approach, by the way. But yeah, what is for you, like, I don't even know how to ask this question, but for you, like, how do you not give up? Like what keeps you drawn into that? And another part, sorry, this is like a 3-part question, but last part of that is, have you given up on climbs? Like, have you found projects that you didn't like? Have you found projects that you kind of walked away from, or walked away from instantly, where you were like, maybe it's not even worth investing because I'm going to give up on it. But there are a lot of falls that I watched you try. I was like, damn, like, oh, he's going to try again, and just sit there and just like, the weather looks like it's getting worse and he's going to try again. Like, that's awesome.
Yeah, I just love the process of it all. I've always valued that more than almost valued it more than the achievement in itself, because I think, I talked about this with some other people recently in terms of like, I sometimes think that the anticipation of an event, of achieving something, is greater than the actual feeling that you get when you achieve it, and that the kind of end goal is only worth anything. The end result is worth anything because you've gone through a period of change and growth, and so I've just kind of learned over the years to have a more like wide view, wide view of it all, and to appreciate that while it's happening, as opposed to just in hindsight. And I think just you can always have one more go. You don't have to let it get to you. I don't really know where to go from there.
You clearly have you clearly like a positive approach. The first thing that I said was you're clearly, to me, having more fun than I've seen most people have in climb. Like, I used to get told this a lot in competitions. It was funny, in competitions I would get told, like, you always like smiling after you fall. I'm like, I'm having fun. Like, it's like, I don't need to win necessarily, not right now, but like, and even if not, like, I'm competing on rock climbs. It's still super fun, but like, and I probably smile outside too, but like, you smile constantly outside. Like, I don't know if it's the way that the films are edited or anything, but like, you falling and like instantly you're like smiling and reminiscing on that try, like whatever. And even when you're frustrated, even when you're
until
like,
you see
so
those
close.
Big Z fails. I'm just kidding. No, it makes me think of the Voyager video I watched, where Voyager is just this incredibly cool prow.
Yes.
And I don't know where in the UK. And yeah, you have a try where you came off and then you had a hole in your finger and then you tape it up. And I do love that. I talk about this all the time because one of my favorite quotes it's from a Dave McLeod book, where he said, pro climbers try their climb one more time than you do. And I take that to heart so deeply. I really always try again, because you never know what's going to happen. But while we're on that topic of that Voyager clip, I sent you this. I cut out a clip from that video and said, I like this. And it's in the same vein of climbing and why you like climbing. And you don't have to repeat what you said in that clip, but I guess I'll just ask you with that as a little cue, like, why do you like climbing, man? Like, what are those moments you're looking for?
I guess I'm looking for that feeling, like we were talking about earlier, of just mastering something. What I'm looking for are great experiences, honestly, on things that inspire me. I think a lot of people share that. And just being out there and just having an objective and going through a period of change. And, I love going to the gym and preparing for them and then getting out there. And then it's like, then you just kind of let loose and try and learn as much as you can. And yeah, it's just that continual pursuit of kind of a feeling of perfection that you have in your head. Obviously it's different for everyone, but with like Big Z specifically, I had this go which isn't necessarily my best go on it. I completely mistimed the drop-in move to the slot, and I didn't stick it at all. Whereas I had that go that I sent you guys, and I actually stick it, but then fall afterwards. But the go before that, those are the moments that I'm kind of searching for, is that the feeling of perfectly flowing through a set of moves that when you first try felt really difficult to link. And then you kind of just work it and figure out the beta and kind of work it to a point where you can enjoy it.
I love that you said experiences. And what really stood out for me in that clip was this line where you said like, you don't even feel like you're climbing, and where you get to the top and you're just kind of there. And I don't know, there's something about, it's hilarious because we're talking about climbing and the mastery of it and feeling good on it. But it really got me when you said something along the lines of when you don't even feel like you're climbing. And to me, those are these moments, I'm not doing it the clip justice, or it's a hard thing to describe, but where you kind of almost aren't there. Like, and I love those. And that's why I want to emphasize the experience component of this process and all of it, because you just said you had this experience on Big Z and it wasn't correlated, or it didn't happen to come at a time of sending, but yeah, those moments are special. I just love that, man.
Yeah, David,
so cool.
Sounds like you like highballing. I'm gonna say, sounds like you really like highballing. It just,
yeah,
that's for me like the most important factor of highballing is, we remove, well, to a certain extent, there's still like a physical component. Obviously, like you can highball extremely hard, but to achieve that experience of like removing the climbing from it and just like having this battle, this like full on, I don't know, immersive experience where like you're just having a flow and like, the conversation with yourself isn't even there. It's just like, you're just experiencing. I think for me, it happens so much highballing that like, that's why I got into it. I am discovering that like hard climbing also has that. You said one very specific thing just now when you're talking about that, experience of climbing for yourself, is the first thing that comes is the fact that you couldn't do them, that you couldn't do the positions, you couldn't do the moves. It didn't feel that good. And then it felt all of a sudden where you had this one go. Like if you go and shit on a climb, then it doesn't really matter as much for you, right? Like unless it is perfect. But what's that perspective, right? Like it's super hard to have that perspective. But that's also again why I like highballing, because I'm probably never gonna try to. I don't think I'll be fulfilled if I try to go and on-site flash some random highball thing that's impressive, in society or to people or whatever. I have to try it first, and I have to experience and how much fear. Like all of the highballs that I've done have always been like fear first, where I'm like, oh hell no, like no way. And then I'm like, okay, let's digest this, and then like have the same process like you're talking about for hard climbing, where you're like, all right, like I can't do these moves, I can't like hold these holds or like do these positions as comfortably as I need to send this thing, but what do I have to do to make sure it gets there? And then like going towards that. But yeah, it sounds like you like highballing. You should highball.
I should. Yeah, maybe.
You like your ankles too?
Yeah, I do like my ankles.
Shit. Okay, never mind.
If you're open to, I just want to try to squeeze out a little bit more on finger training. And this is just, look, I keep saying you have extremely strong fingers, and you do, and blah, blah, blah. And I don't have really strong fingers, but I want them, especially on small holds. So I'm just going to, just before we start heading into another segment, I want to dig a little bit more into, I want to know, did you always have strong fingers? I want to know, is hangboard something that you do a lot and you credit to some of your success? And when we talk about hangboarding, like what does that actually mean? Like what do you actually do? Because I know you even mentioned like rotational component on there. And yeah, so there's 3 hard line finger training things. Were you good at hangboarding, and what do you do?
Okay. Tackle those one at a time. I think I did have a relatively good base of finger strength or hand strength when I first started. I think that's fair to say. But I wasn't able to move from holds. I could hold the holds, but I couldn't move from them. And so I spent a lot of my formative years then, just like I was saying, just working those weaknesses on the wall. And then the hangboarding came in many years later, and I started to just incorporate a little bit here and there. Nowadays, I train all of like my small holds with like high flexion in the pinky and drags and all these different grip types, all these kind of more complicated grip types, and I focus on like we were saying, the pull direction, all that kind of stuff on the board. And then I then use the hangboarding just for kind of positional training, getting like my body used to staying in that frontal position with like shoulders parallel to the wall, very strict form, because I find on a lot of the things that I like to do, which is these overhung flat faces, is that you need to stay in that position in order to generate movement inwards. And over the years, a lot of the things that I was struggling on was doing a series of moves and then losing the form and then needing to compensate in a certain way. And then that would result in me then having to move out from the wall in order to stick the next hold. And so, so I train all of my small holds on the board, and then I train position on the fingerboard. But in generally speaking, I think I train positions more than I train moves. I'll do a lot of isometric holds on the wall, find these really awkward positions and just hold them and breathe through them.
On the wall.
Yeah. I think
with your feet on.
With my feet on, exactly. Yeah, just these really weird positions that, like, it's usually how I create board problems, is that I'll just find this messed up position and I'll pull on and I'll just do these breaths through it, and I'll just do sets of that, and then I'll work into moving into that position. And then when you've worked the isometric aspect with the breathing, then moving into it, and just you'll feel a sense of comfort that you wouldn't have before. And I think overall my kind of strategy is always to work positions rather than moves, specifically for rock climbing. I mean, it's very different for competition climbing and stuff like that, but outdoors, usually if you can hold the position, the initiation kind of position, the move isn't too bad. Kind of like lucid. The main issue with lucid is that it's this really just hard isometric hold off of the undercut and the pinch, and you just have to feel comfortable in that position to generate the movement. Like, the move in itself isn't this crazy thing that we've never seen before. It's a very basic move, but just having that ability to stay comfortable in that position is key.
That's freaking awesome, by the way, all of that. And I just want to ask like a clarifying question, because you're talking about rotation. And so you said something around your struggle with sometimes keeping the good position on maybe like a flat overhang, and that you'll start to come out from the wall, right? And so this ability to be parallel or be square, I think we sometimes say. So I think when you talk about doing that on the hangboard, something that I noticed in your one arm hangs is that you stay parallel, like you don't twist into it. Is that, am I understanding that that's what you meant by that? Training for it? Yeah,
I think it's it's the way I've always trained, staying parallel. And as soon as that swing starts to happen, that's the end of the set. And
that is so freaking hard, dude.
Yeah, it's a tricky way of training.
Like, it's like the difference. You ever, people do one arm. If I do a one arm pull up, I definitely, pull into, it becomes a chin up at the end, right? Like, let's say it's a pull up, and I have a buddy who was a gymnast. This guy Cisco. Did you ever know Cisco, Tim? Okay, he was a gymnast. He climbed as well. His one arm strength, I want to argue, is probably world class. He could climb a rope with one arm, so like dynamically doing one arm pull-ups. But then there's this video of him doing maybe like 10 or 12 one-arm pull-ups on each arm, and he's on a high bar, and he has that beautiful gymnast position where he's just, straight, feet together, toes pointed, and he does like 10 plus one arms on each arm without any twisting. Just like it looks like it looks improbable, but you kind of had a similar look to you on those one arm hangs where I see most people tapping the wall, and it's just I don't know. It's interesting to hear, and it's interesting to hear that you had a why behind it, and it just makes me want to play around with that a little bit.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of ways to make hangboarding easier and to be able to load up more weight on these one-arm hangs, or to be able to just hold them for longer by rotating the shoulder inwards. But that's rarely, the amount of extra force that you can produce in those positions is rarely used outside. It's usually, you just kind of have to put your ego aside sometimes and be like, well, I'm trying these climbs and it's in this position and I don't have access to my bicep in that way. And certain things like that, you kind of have to, it's just a strict way of training that I've always adopted. And and I think I've started to do these kind of long duration ones recently where I just hang for as long as, do these like long duration sets and try to build up capacity in that way, and having that kind of neuromuscular benefit of staying in that position.
It's freaking awesome. Can I you said the word high angle crimping, and this is something relatively new for me in the past year or so, where I heard about that. I heard Aiden Roberts is the guy who I equate with high angle crimping, but then I heard, I'm blanking on some of his kind of coaches' names, but maybe Ollie Tor, I want to say. Yeah. I just found it this really interesting concept, and this is just me, sharing about why I'm so interested. It's, I say I don't have strong fingers, but I actually do on bigger holds. But then when it gets to be very, very thin, I really struggle, and I will climb with people who maybe if we were to hang weight on a 12 mil, I would be superior to, but then you put me on a 6 mil and they make me look bad. And I'm starting to learn more about this high angle crimping and the physics behind it. I just was wondering how you train that, or how you think about that, and how it applies to your climbing.
Yeah, I think that has a lot to do with the pull direction as well. When you're on the wall, being in a high angle, even if it's not super in-cut, it allows you to just milk the friction and pull away from the wall and suck in. Whereas when you're in a different kind of, well, definitely when you're in a half crimp, you don't have that ability to pull into the wall. I spoke to Aiden recently, actually, and we were talking about that, and it was, as well, like a lot of holds are, I climb a lot with my pinky flexed out to the side, like almost split, and like my thumb wrapping around the side too. So I have that ability to like torque. I wish
we had more video. We look hilarious. We'll put this on YouTube too. We're just all like our hands up.
I do that too.
Sorry, yeah.
Actually got me injured,
wait,
but...
I want to hear more. I want to see more. Or I want to hear more. We're on a podcast, but yeah, show me with your hands too.
Yeah, like basically, like climbing a lot with the pinky separated and out to the side, almost creating this like, you're almost, with that position, you're able to torque on holds and rotate.
Oh, interesting.
And it's
not more
so
external rotation.
Exactly.
Oh,
yeah.
That's interesting. Wait, can I see how long your pinky is in comparison to your other fingers?
It's not super long.
Yeah.
But it's
okay. That's, dude, I think maybe this is why I don't do as well on this, because there's finger morphology is a thing. My pinky is lower than than my pip joint or my dip joint on my finger, and I just find that, I mean, I do get my pinky on. It's not like I love having my pinky on, but I know Aiden talked about how strong his pinky was and how he preferred sometimes back three, and it seemed like he was just physically able to load it more, where I'm definitely more of a front two or front three. So my other question is, how flexible are your pip joints? These are like, you know, the joints right next to your fingertip. Do you find that you really can hyperextend them? Is that a factor in this?
Yeah, I think, I can definitely extend them quite a lot, but I think,
Yeah, I actually noticed that in your climbing. Like, yeah, I didn't know that was a thing. Like your pip joint, like when you're talking about when he flexes, you see how mine doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, Dave, your fingers go like
pretty like,
like that, like that. Yeah,
and that almost like
that's
creates.
crazy. So why is that significant?
Well, because it allows you to pull into the wall more. Like if you look at the physics behind it, you pull into the wall. So when you are doing hangs on the make a fist, that's what it looks like.
Clawing.
So when you do hangs on the hangboard, and if you do full crimping on the hangboard, like are you extremely hyper extended? I guess when I go and I do, like, let's say I'm hanging on 8 or 6 mils or something, and let's say I'm just doing a set. What I notice is that even though I'm full crimped in the sense that I am hyperextended on my pip joints, they're pretty low. Like, you know, I'm showing you here, it'll be like this. So my half crimp may be here, but even my full crimp is kind of,
same here.
It kind of sags. When I put my thumb on, maybe I get a little higher, but I try to train without the thumb, because when I put the thumb on, I'm just like, oh yeah, like that's good. So yeah, I know we're like super down the rabbit hole, but like, I'm curious, man. This is something I'm fascinated by, because I need to work on it more.
Oh yeah, I'm fascinated by it too. I think the mechanics of the hand are really interesting. But on the hangboard, I train half crimp, and I usually my pinky drags in that sense. But kind of what I was saying with working the rotational elements, that's all that I'm kind of focused on. Kind of like the way a handstand, someone who practices handstands controls their position with their fingers. That's kind of what I'm focusing on, and just getting a mind kind of hand connection.
So while you're hanging, you just like adjust your grip a little bit.
I'm like,
hanging,
I definitely
moving around your.
Wow. Yeah. Well, he's saying, I think what he's saying, Tim, is that his hand may not be adjusting and moving. It's that the pressure between
each finger.
Because he's trying to control his body. As
awesome.
Someone who does a lot of handstands, because of my gymnastics background, you are constantly, moving through your fingers. But dude, the only problem I have with what you're saying is that what you're basically telling me is that your hands are so freaking strong that you are like playing with some other element that like most of us haven't even started to consider yet. You're like, look, I could just hang on here forever, so I need to like make it tougher. I'm just trying to hang on, Dave. Like not,
but that's like, but
twist,
that's like,
you know?
That's like your campusing thing, you know, like, if you can do 1-arm pull-ups, that campusing thing is probably one of the best things you should train, because it kind of revolves around your whole body. And like, I've been doing a lot of like front lever training. Like, Dan Beal is someone who I've seen as like the absolute strongest, like front lever core. And like, I just want to be able to be like about that strong. But now that I've been doing that, I'm doing like pull-ups in the front lever, like moving side to side. And like, dude, it's crazy. Like, why didn't I think about that for the fingers? Like, you know, I didn't ever, I think from not climbing outside as much, or like not climbing hard outside as much, I didn't see it as that important, you know, like plastic holds are quite linear, and like how, you know, what the optimal way to grab them is, and like what the optimal way to move around them is. And then when you're talking about compensation, when your fingers do get weak, you can do that on the plastic walls a lot, like with a lot of momentum and a lot of like body climbing and stuff. So you should practice that. But man, like having strong fingers, when I go outside, I definitely struggle like on climbs that don't have like, you know, good holds, because, and then I usually just like write them off. I'm like, whatever, like my fingers aren't strong enough. But I am curious. I'm gonna train that too. I'm stoked. That is super, super cool. I'm actually curious.
So cool.
Do you have strong like mono strength? Or like, do you have you tested that? Do you train that isolated?
No, I've never trained them individually. I do have like mono strength. I've better weird 2-finger strength. Like better shallow 2-finger strength than I do like a deep mono strength.
Yeah,
it's not totally surprising, because that's actually kind of more crimping in a way. Like it's like you're kind of like crimping where. There's like a different structure to your crimping than it is to like open hand, obviously. But
But the reason why I kind of bring that up was because I also grab holds, like with my pinky flared out. But I've had probably 4 pulley stresses or injuries on my ring fingers because of that. And for me, I just like have bad form, I think, like when I do it. But my strength coach to combat that, Andy, who was on the podcast before, he told me that a lot of like the optimal finger strength comes from your fingers all the way together, like actively putting them together. And I think that's probably scientifically true, but obviously you don't get, X, Y, and Z pro from like splitting your fingers. And so I guess like for me, I'm going to choose to train both because I think, the kind of inside is obviously where you get most strength. If you want to just grab this linear hold, like what Josh is saying on like a better hold, he has extremely strong recruitment. I do as well. And like, relative to like my 6 mil or 8 mil, I can't like use those depths of holds as much. But yeah, I think it's so interesting. Everything you're talking about, like where you're training your fingers. And
that was freaking gold. I love that. I don't know.
Yeah,
for me, that was
awesome.
that was so cool. I mean, I guess it does make me, it makes me think that sometimes our weaknesses, I mean, I may never have as strong crimp strength as Dave, period, but especially on maybe, 6 mils, or, as strong as Aiden. But so often we write people off in their strengths as being like, oh, he's born with it or whatever. It's just like, yeah, like whatever. Like, oh, Dave has strong fingers, and you dive into it. It's like, yeah, maybe there was a propensity there, but taking it that extra next step, or maybe extra 2, 3, 4, 5 steps, and thinking it through, being fascinated with holds themselves, hand morphology, the training around it, doing things that aren't so conventional. Like this idea of thinking about the rotational component is definitely, I mean, I would say that there's kind of like this idea that, hey, maybe let's not twist because it's harder. And just this idea of like, it's harder, but why is it harder? And how does that apply to climbing is really cool to hear that insight, man. I love that. I don't know. I really love that.
Yeah. That's always been my kind of outlook, is just questioning why it's harder, and positions on these training exercises versus other positions, and kind of like just analyzing that more, I think is important.
Navigating like dangerous versus discomfort.
Yeah.
Just like leaning towards discomfort and making sure it's comfortable.
Yes. Yeah. I think like outside you're going to come up against these split, messed up holds, and you kind of do need a certain level of exposure for that. So training it in the right way is important too.
That's awesome.
Okay, you dropped about 50 knowledge bombs in the last 50 minutes, but Dave, did you by any chance prepare a pro tip for us / everyone listening? Do you got a little pro tip for us?
Pro tip.
Yeah.
I struggle to call myself a pro.
Can't be, no amateur tip. I don't want just boring amateur tip like I give. I want a pro tip.
A pro tip. Here we go. Get ready. I think my big tip would be just to like build your base. I think it's very easy to get sucked into the idea of valuing short-term gain over long-term success, specifically indoors and in preparation for what you're trying to achieve. The kind of idea of get to the top by any means necessary, scrap, like you might scrap your way up something, scrap your way through a move. But once you get through it, it's like, oh, that's old news. You don't need to address that when you come down. I think that can be quite a hindrance to your development as a climber. I think when you do something, always if there's something that needs addressing, address it. And I think otherwise it kind of leads to stagnation and injury. And like stagnation is the biggest killer of motivation, and injury is the biggest killer of progress. And you need, or at least your ability to consistently prepare and train. And I think you need consistency and motivation to really just really paying attention to that aspect, and kind of don't be afraid, to just work a move over and over and over again. Even if you're doing it, do it a different way, play around with it a bit. Don't always think of just the top. I think that.
Amazing.
Hey, Tim, does that remind you of Carlo's thing where Carlo talked about,
yeah,
I think my guess is it had to do with him more when he was younger and probably still building that base, where he would do a boulder and he would do a boulder. This is my hunches, it was more likely indoors. And then he would just do it again and again and again until it was absolutely perfect. And then he would say, okay, how can I do this like completely different? Like what if I did it with a heel hook instead of a pogo or something, and then do the same process over again. I love that, that focus on the long game too, that, like no one cares that you don't even care in hindsight that you made it up that, pinchy V8 that you just thrust your way through. What would be really cool is you made it beautiful, and then 5 years later, somehow deep inside that helped you with that pinch on Lucid.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Break things apart, assess all the individual bits of it, and then slowly but surely kind of stitch it together, and then into this kind of package that you can then, this like package of skills and experiences then that you can bring towards your next thing. Keep the ball rolling, and don't just treat it as a once-off thing. Address everything, become certain that you can do it every go, and then move on.
Yeah, that's like a good climber thing. Like any good climber, pro climber, in my opinion, is more so they're not just technical abilities and physical abilities, but their ability to break things down and deconstruct, and then use that to make sense of what they're doing, and then make sense of the next thing that they're doing. That is really probably the most underrated technique in climbing, is that pro tip you just gave. So hell yeah.
That was beautiful. I really don't want to make sure. I want to make sure that we don't miss this whole other aspect of your life, which is still kind of woven into climbing. But
I was going to bring this up.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, we didn't even lead into it in the beginning. But Dave, you are a film editor. You may have edited a climb that came out recently that people like, called A Little Life, featuring Keenan Takahashi doing a absolutely beautiful climb in Bishop. I want to make sure that we don't forget to cover this other aspect of your life that I know you say you find just as much deep immersion. And maybe we can get into it by hearing about your experience on A Little Life. And I really want to make sure you give, because if you don't, I'll do it, give a shout out to some of those other people involved, because they're amazing people. And although I do want to say, great video, man. Just before we get into it,
I loved it.
Loved it, dude. Great work. Just beautiful name, congruent with the story start to finish, and good job to Keenan for putting another beautiful lineup in a beautiful place. Yeah. What was that like, Dave? What was that, a fun one?
Oh my God. It was, one of the best experiences. Got to work with two extremely close friends, and you're right. Good, my job as an editor, I put it together, but, good cuts don't happen in a vacuum. And those guys, just to work as a team and collaborate on that has been super fulfilling. Get to see both of their kind of ways.
Shout them out, Dave.
Yes.
Get to say who they were. Who are those other people that helped make it happen?
So, well, obviously Keenan, who climbed the damn thing, and really just supported the whole film project, and we're hoping to submit it to film festivals and stuff, and he's helping a lot in a big way with that. And Eric Bissell, he was the filmmaker behind it all, and Eric's just such an incredible filmmaker. He has just so much talent. I think we've talked about this quite a lot in the past, in that as a cinematographer, it's very easy to kind of fall down the trap of focusing all of your attention on capturing beautiful imagery, and maybe neglecting to capture story, or like the necessary building blocks to really shape the pace and rhythm within an edit. And he's just amazing at doing both. He like comes from a photography background, and all of his shots are just beautiful to work with. They're like paintings. It's incredible. He's just had this breadth of experience with like exposing and composing frames, and you can just see that he just points the camera at something and he just churns out these beautiful images.
Also, as we're saying amazing things about Eric, I just want to share with the audience that Eric also, I would argue, kind of underrated. He maybe doesn't send quite as hard as you, Dave, but I would say that Eric may be one of the best slab climbers. I don't know. I would put him against anyone in the world if you just wanted to say hard slab. I remember him putting up this, I don't know, double-digit slab in Squamish. I think it's called Kadama, and it is just gorgeous. So yeah, Eric, we love you, man. So
that's what I've heard too. Yeah,
he's a beast.
Climbed much with him actually.
What's it like bringing your deep knowledge of climbing into your deep knowledge of editing and how it all comes together? Because I mean, I know you went to school for it. I mean, it's what you do for work, and just weaving that all in. How does that come through when you decide to craft a story? And I know it's a collaborative effort, but you have a deep understanding of what it's like to be in Keenan's shoes, and how's that come through when you do what you do?
Yeah, I think just having this, just all of the experiences that I've had in climbing, I soak up climbing media like there's no tomorrow. Anything new that comes out, I watch it. I've just been a fan of it. I remember when I first started climbing, I used to just, because I found it in university, I found climbing in university, and I just go to the library and just sit there for like 8 hours straight when I didn't have classes and just binge watch all of the dosages, all of anything that came out, and it's really amazing to see the kind of direction that films are being taken in these days. I mean, like with Irwin Tim and the stuff that Brennan's doing, the stuff that Bobby and Ben Nielsen and Nathaniel Davidson, all these guys are just being super creative in their own fields, and it's motivating to see. But and all of those guys are climbers, and I think knowing Keenan as well, getting to know Keenan has been such a pleasure. But training with him, going outside, trying things with him, just getting to know his kind of his methods and stuff has helped a lot with this project, and knowing where to place the focus. And I think just knowing
what's missing, like what in the current, just like, I feel like you have with that background of like that absolute obsession with the history and, binge watching everything. You've probably watched almost everything that's documented in climbing, I would bet. And like, I assume you have opinions, and A Little Life is very different. A Little Life is a very different film, and edited in a way that is, it includes things that aren't usually included, and it highlights things that usually aren't highlighted. And like, that's obviously done on purpose, right? Because even in editing, our movie Focus, like, we were going back and forth with me, Bobby, and Brennan, like, what should be shown. And Bobby ultimately has that say, but sometimes we're attached to like what wants to be shown. And I guess, do you think that things are unincluded that should be included in edits? Do you want specific things just in your films, or like, and I guess, do you have anything specific that you have a project going for, or like you want to make for a film that like, needs to be shown in climbing?
And that's a great question. I think every film is different. I think basically with The Little Life, I wanted to just kind of let it be what it was going to be. I think I do a lot of, I spend a lot of my time watching other documentaries as well, and trying to merge certain aspects of different worlds together. And I think mostly just I always appreciate when climbing films go a little more deep and aren't so general, and you really get to hear from the climber and know what's going through their head, and that doesn't always have to be exposition. The climber doesn't always need to be saying it, but you can convey that through context of For a Little Life, like all of his old footage and watching that build throughout, and his whole, you can just see the evolution of his whole development through climbing and his mindset, and then it all culminating in this one moment. I personally just love seeing that more in climbing, and a big credit to Eric as well, like filming it. He's not always placing the attention on the action. Sometimes that can be a bit misleading. Sometimes the more interesting thing is the reaction to the action, or little bits, like little inserts or whatever. But he just has a really good way of capturing story, or just giving me the building blocks that I can then sculpt in the edit, and hearing the in-between bits, keeping the camera rolling in between goes, hearing what, say Keenan and Katie are talking about, how he's processing it, all of that stuff. I just had gold to work with. And then he started sending me all these archive clips from his childhood and working that in. And it was just amazing. Like, I left the intro of A Little Life till the very end, because I knew that it would bring everything after it into context. And I really enjoyed that process, because I knew what it was going to kind of be like, all these flashbacks. And just watching it then build throughout, and then the send of A Little Life that's
so cool.
It's more, it was
so cool.
Such a privilege to edit that one.
Do you have any other people that you're like working with now, or like stuff in mind that is going to be really interesting to film, or like stories that you wanted to create? Like, it sounds like you're just starting like with your editing career. I mean, you do it otherwise, and have been doing it for a while, but like for climbing, like, and that's a big one that came out like right away with a big bang. But like, what would be next for you?
Yeah, you're right. I am kind of just starting out in the climbing world. I've always cut climbing stuff. Since I started climbing, I had a camera, and I just enjoy cutting together little bits here and there, but actually making it a career, and I had to navigate a lot of like corporate videos and stuff like that to finance it. And then I think moving over here, it's just taken a while to meet these people like Keenan and Eric, and I'm going to be doing another one with Eric soon, with Katie Lamb,
nice,
documenting some of her stuff, and that's going to be a great experience. She's killing it, and we're psyched to show that. I did a bit of I was communicating with Josh Lowell recently, and that doing like little bits of work with him, and that's been a bit of a dream as well. And just hoping to like get
make a real rock or something. Bigger one.
I mean, it's no big surprise that A Little Life was so good that I'm not surprised that kind of you did come out with a bang on this, but I don't think it hurts that you really deeply understand the climbing process. I just think that it's helpful when you're talking to an athlete and you're asking a certain thing. I know maybe that's not always your role as the editor, but just you're on the same page, and I feel like they are probably going to be more trusting of you to tell their story because they understand, or because you understand what really goes into that. And I love it. I can't wait to, I don't know. Yeah. I love climbing media. It makes me think that maybe the pendulum is swinging back towards kind of where it came, or I shouldn't say pendulum swinging in a bad way all the way back to where it was. There's this, old school, more of the dosages, or even more before, like the real rock. Sometimes maybe there was not as much action and there was more story. And then we get more of the internet and social media, and we really highlight these 10-second clips. And, and that was great too. It was kind of fun just seeing, seeing a flood of 8C climbs. Like there was a time where, dosage comes out and you're like, oh my God, like that's what a hard climb looks like. You know, that's someone actually doing a hard climb. Then the internet, it all came out. We saw, you know, a lot of those clips, and maybe that got a little bit boring. And now combining that, you know, the what came before and telling that story, I don't know. I'm always looking forward to more media around climbing.
Dude,
I gobble it up too.
Yes.
If I watch climbing like nowadays, I go only back like probably pre when I started climbing, you know, like I only watch pre 2010 videos, it seems like, or like the recent one, you know, anything with Chris Sharma, Adam Ondra, or like I watch Rock Punked a lot, the Alex Magos Rock Punked.
That's a great one. Yeah.
Longer film. Like I
love that.
See, I watched I only watch specific things. Like I obviously glance through and like skim through all of the media that comes out nowadays, but like I want something more, you know? And so I'm really looking forward to editors like you who are going to come out with stories that like, I remember just like watching A Little Life, and like my expectation was pretty neutral. Like I didn't expect anything, and I didn't really care if it was like good or bad, and just being blown away. I was like, fuck yeah. Like that is what we wanted to see. Like that was so cool, you know, but like more of that needs to exist. And I've been saying that, you know, to Brennan for years. And like, that's why we try, you know, and tried with Focus. But it still needs so much work, our industry, with like, you know, where media is going. Because yeah, I think a lot of people, like even my girlfriend, I start, you know, showing her, like we were watching some recent World Cup. She's like, it's just like not that fun. And I was like, all right. I'll put on Adidas Rockstars Legends Only from like 2012. Like that's what was cool. And she was like, this is amazing. Like he said, we can binge watch those for hours and hours and hours, you know, but like the stuff right now, I cannot watch for longer than like an hour, you know? So I'm waiting for it. It's awesome that you're doing it.
Oh, it's great. Yeah. Just psyched to be in the mix.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing what's coming. And I do want to say that it feels like we're kind of in the golden age of new media creation, because although A Little Life did totally stand out, there's some great stuff going on with, I love some of the stuff Seb's been putting out on YouTube. YouTube has just, I mean, there's some really high quality content getting dropped on YouTube that is more than just, you know, climbing porn of, you know, hard sending. So thanks for adding to that. And can't say enough good things about A Little Life. That was just a blast. And good things about Keenan, Eric, and Katie is just freaking incredible. I love everything about what she's doing, and psyched to see what's next for her too.
Yeah. We're all psyched to see what those guys do. They're just, their whole approach to the sport and the lifestyle is super inspiring, and someone just always needs to be pointing a camera at them, in my opinion.
That's actually a really interesting insight. And I think it's coming more and more true. And I really think that, you know, I hate saying this, but it's almost like if you don't have a camera on when you send, did it even happen? And that's kind of taboo and kind of new, but, you know, and you anyone could take issue with what I'm saying, but more it's just like, these are amazing people doing amazing things, and there's always a story behind it. And I talked about this. There's something about, there's a connection between art and sharing. It's not, you know, yes, going out and doing something in the forest by yourself is cool, but I think there's something beautiful and special about sharing it with other people through media and giving people a new way to experience a climb. You know, whoever does the second ascent of Keenan's terrifying highball, they're Tim,
I'm looking at him.
There'll be you know that whoever it is will have watched that video 1,000 times, and that part of their reason for going and doing it is because of what you help create. So you know, you're crafting it, not just something for us to experience here, but even creating experiences for the next climbers who go on to grow up with that media as the on repeat, you know. So cool stuff, man.
Oh, that's awesome to hear. Love that. Yeah, it's the same with all the Tahoe guys too, with the stuff that they're doing. And just, again, someone should always just be pointing a camera at them. And I think we are going to come out with some pretty cool things documenting the stuff that they're doing and their whole thing.
Awesome. That's what I wanted to hear. That's all right. All right. that's my list of questions. Tim, is there anything you got, or Dave? Did we?
I love
did we
this
not,
discussion.
Yeah, did we not bring up anything that you had to that you was burning a hole in your pocket that you wanted to say?
Not really. I think. Yeah.
Actually, I have one more, but we don't have to go into a discussion. Please. But you said one thing that I don't know if we said on air that I think really represents you as a climber, and you embody this really well, and definitely in the filmmaking that you're going to have. You said this thing when we talked about aesthetics: clean boulders deserve clean climbing. And I had some things that I want to talk about, but I don't really want to go into it. I just think that really embodies climbing culture and philosophy at heart, but you really do a good job of embodying that. And in your climbing is obviously, but it's clear that that's important to you. But clean boulders deserve clean climbing, and that seems to be like something you try to just fulfill in your lifestyle and the training that you do, and allowing yourself to try to do that on the climbing wall, but also like clearly in your filmmaking and your editing.
Yeah, I think thanks for the kind words, first of all. I do kind of I think editing and climbing do have a lot of ties for me, in that in editing frames matter. 2 frames matters, a frame matters. Like same in climbing. It's the minutia that really can make a big difference, for me anyway, this kind of at this stage of my climbing. Doing all the things, doing a lot of training in a lot of ways, like a lot of the ways that we talked about earlier, they're to squeeze out the last 1%, 2%. And I love that. I love getting to that aspect of anything where you're just hammering away at the minutia, and hopefully I can find something that I can express it on.
That's the goal. Beautiful. That's the path from good to great. That was awesome, Dave. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing so much, and thank you for not just sharing here, but creating hard climbs, beautiful media, and just can't wait to see more from you, both in the climbing world and the media you create.
I appreciate that. Yeah, thanks so much for having me on, and hopefully we'll see each other at the boulders this next coming season.
We will.
Lucid 2023-2024 season. Woo!
Let's get a team on it.
All right, guys. You guys take care.
You too.
And see you on the next one.
Thanks for tuning in. If you'd like to learn more about Testpiece climbing, you can check us out at testpiececlimbing.com and even book a session with one of our coaches.